Listen-only mode.
Okay, we're going to begin our presentation. I'd like to welcome everyone to the ISO 9001-2015 Critical Points of Review during the Transition Audit Process. My name is Joseph Krolikowski and I am the Technical Director of Perry Johnson Registrars. Couple of notes for everybody. All of our participants are on mute, but we absolutely want to answer your questions, so please utilize the question portion of the dashboard and we will make time for your questions at the conclusion of today's presentation. I'll also share with you that copies of today's presentation will be available for download shortly after we're finished. And this webinar and all other past PGR webinars is going to be available for reviewing on our website under the previously recorded webinars link. Our topics for today, we're going to be addressing how the transition will be handled. We're going to talk about additional audit time. We'll have a deep dive into the new content, new audit content. We'll have some summary remarks on how the audit to ISO 9001-2015 differs from ISO 9001-2008 and also how it's similar. I'll have some concluding remarks and then we will take your questions. As to how the transition audit will be handled, PJR recognizes that our clients have different needs in terms of the timing of their transition. And so we have offered essentially a transition at any point in the certification phase. Preferably, it should be done as part of a recertification audit. The recertification audit already includes additional audit time. Obviously, it already comes with the issuance of a new certificate. So this is the ideal timing for your transition. But we realize that that will not work for everybody. So we do also offer transition as part of a surveillance audit. Many of our clients are on annual surveillance audits. Some of them are on semi-annual surveillance audits. In both cases, there is likely going to be a small amount of additional audit time added to the surveillance audit. It's going to vary a little bit from case to case. It is our preference that it be done in a single step. If you are a semi-annual surveillance audit client, we will allow you to transition on consecutive semi-annual surveillances. It can be done in a single semi-annual surveillance, which is, we feel, the more appropriate path. But again, we want to be reasonable with what we are offering to our clients. Now, if you choose to transition over a surveillance audit, you will get a revised certificate, a revision to your existing ISO 9001-2008 certificate. Let's take a look at how that would work. Okay, so let's say that you completed a audit, a certification audit in late 2015, and you were issued an ISO 9001-2008 certificate in January of 2016. And that certificate bore number C2016-12345, issue date January 15th, 2016, expiry in September 14th, 2018. Now obviously that's not a full 3-year certificate. That cutoff date, that expiration date, is due to the mandatory cutoff that was established by the ISO for any ISO 9001-2008 certifications. That is the absolute last date that an ISO 9001-2008 certificate will be considered valid. So in that situation, if the organization were to then complete a transition to 9001-2015 in early 2018, this would then result in a revised certificate. And you'll note now the number is C2016-12345-R1. This would be, of course, for revision 1. And now we see the issue date is the same. January 15th, 2016, but now we've pushed out that expiration date, January 14th, 2019. So this is now a full 3-year certificate. Now that would be possible if the transition was done in 2018 or 2017. We would still issue that revised certificate if the transition was done as part of a surveillance audit, so that the cert now bears the full 3-year period. As to the additional amount of audit time that's needed, we have prepared a special grid to help calculate additional audit time for a transition audit when the transition is performed as part of a surveillance. Now, the full amount of detail is considered confidential, but we can share the following details. Number one, most of our average size clients are only going to require an additional half day of audit time to complete their transition. Some companies will be able to transition with no added time at all, no added audit time for the transition. If you have questions on your individual company, your particular case, I do encourage you to reach out to either your scheduler or your sales representative. Now, for new audit content, we put a lot of work into this process. We identified a list of key new items that would require verification during the transition audit. So what we're going to be doing now is reviewing these items and also trying to give you some insight into how these new items are going to be approached in the audit process. And we begin in Section 4. Most of the changes are found in Sections 4, 5, and 6. And certainly some of the more significant changes are found in 4 and 5. In Section 4, we begin with 4.1, where it talks about a process to determine, monitor, and review external and internal issues that are relative to the purpose and strategic direction. Now, I want you to note the term strategic direction. Bear that in mind. We're going to be revisiting that term in just a little bit. What I want you to key in on with this clause is the phrase internal and external issues. That's key here. And the next clause is actually going to give some shape to how we view this. But the use of the term issues is broad, and it's intended to be broad. It's intended to identify the fact that for the average organization, there's going to be things going on inside and outside that are going to impact the organization, that are going to impact the quality management system. Now, our approach on this has been to direct our questions on this directly to top management, directly to leadership, and we're going to be visiting that in just a little bit. From there, we transition to Section 4.2. Now, in Clause 4.2, we've got 2 slides here. First, have we determined who our interested parties are? And then if we jump ahead another slide, have we established a process to monitor and review information about interested parties and identify what their requirements are? So we now add the layer of interested parties. And again, the idea is that these are going to be both internal and external. And there's been a lot of talk about this term and what's required, what isn't required. I want to address a couple of things in our discussion here. First of all, for the most part, what we want to confirm is that you as an organization, that you understand this term. And moreover, that you know who your interested parties are, that you have done the analysis, you've determined who they are. Now, we've heard some chatter about, do you have to have a list of who your interested parties are? No, not a formal list per se, but you do have to really have a firm grasp of this concept and how it applies to your organization. And again, our approach to this has been to ask the question. We address the question to the management team, and we kind of gauge how confident they are in responding to that question. Looking then at 4.3, is the scope statement accurate? Is it appropriate? Does it take into account internal and external issues, interested party requirements? Is it reflective of the products and services of the organization? Now, these are all ideas that were present in the older version of the standard, but they weren't explicit. And so now they're much more explicit. What we've done to address this is we've added a question to our audit report that essentially directs the auditor to look at your scope statement in the context with what the auditor is seeing in your organization. Do those two items line up with each other? Section 4.3 also talks about non-applicable clauses and exemptions. And the idea here is that if there is an item that does not apply to you, you can exempt it from your system. Now, I had some interesting insight on this speaking to Nigel Croft, who is the chair of the committee that wrote this standard. He indicated that in the opinion of the committee, the idea is that everything that's in the standard should be applicable to every organization, and it was his feeling that exemptions were going to be relatively rare items. Now, the practicality of that, of course, is another matter. But the larger picture here is that if there is something that you simply do not do and the requirements do not apply, you need to document what those items are. You need to have some sort of justification for it. As before with permissible exclusions, you cannot exempt something just because you don't want to do it or have that requirement be addressed in your system. Looking then to Section 5, we have what is perhaps one of the more impacting requirements in Section 511A. Has management demonstrated that it is accountable for the effectiveness of the quality management system? This is another idea that I think was very much present in the system of old, but it really was not called out in this matter. And the idea, of course, is that management needs to take the lead. They need to be responsible for the system. And in terms of how we have approached this as auditors, we've done a couple of things. We've added a couple of questions to our audit report, and we've also specifically instructed our auditors to perform what we refer to as a leadership interview. And we're going to be exploring what that's all about a little bit later in the presentation. But beyond the leadership interview, we are going to be looking to see, okay, is the management team, is the leadership team, are they involved in the system? Do we see their presence at management review? Are they part of corrective action? Are they participating in complaint resolution and so forth? Do they really have their hands on this system and play an active role in its success? 511B says that management needs to ensure that the quality policy and objectives are compatible with the strategic direction of the company. I mentioned earlier that we would be back to this term. So let's take a deeper dive now into what strategic direction is all about. Strategic direction is a phrase that comes up a few times in the 9001 standard. But curiously, it is not a term that has been officially defined. It's not officially defined in ISO 9001 or ISO 9000, and even the ISO 9002 guidance document lacks an official explanation of what this term is all about. I think their intent was that it was obvious, which our early analysis was that it wasn't quite as obvious as perhaps they felt. So what we did was we reached out to members of the committee and we spoke to other members of the industry and tried to get a general consensus on what this term is all about. And the consensus was that strategic direction refers to your vision of where you want to be in the future. You can think about what is your mission, what is your vision, and the idea is that your quality system and the goals that are associated with your processes should contribute to not just the day-to-day, but also to the larger mission of the organization. So how do we audit that? How are we going to approach that? Well, a couple of things. Again, we're going to be looking to see what management has to say on the topic. We're going to be getting a sense of, is there a strategic direction? Do we have a long-term vision? Is it evident in, is there a business plan? Perhaps, even if it's not something we can look at. Is there evidence of a strategic direction in the management review meeting minutes, in operational memos, and so forth? So a new idea for us to follow up on in the audit process. 511C talks about management ensuring that quality management system requirements are integrated into business processes. This requirement scared a few people, I think, when it came out, and there was some misinformation on this. We've gotten a better hold of this requirement now. In the past, accounting and those types of areas were always considered hands-off in the audit process. We don't look at your books and things like this. That is still very much the case. We do not dig into accounting books. So what do they mean by this requirement? Integrating quality management system requirements into business processes. Well, they're going after a couple of things. Number one, those processes, business processes, they all use documents. They all use documents that should be subject to revision level control. They all maintain records, the record retention requirements, and for the most part they all use people, and the people that perform those activities should be competent. So if you're going to apply revision control to documents, if you're going to have record retention practices, if you're going to have skilled, competent staff, those items, those ideals should be manifest in your business processes the same as they are in every other aspect of your organization. That's the larger vision of what they're going for with this clause. Moving on to section 5.2, we have a little bit of an expansion on the availability of the quality policy. And that is that it be made available to all relevant interested parties. And again, you'll remember that interested parties is both internal and external. So this is not something that you want to keep under wraps. And we've been told and we've concluded that this is really quite straightforward. You can post it in your facility, you can post it on your website, you can even, according to ISO 9002, it's permissible to make the quality policy available upon request. In 5.3, has management taken on the responsibility for managing the quality management system? This particular clause replaces the old idea of what was formerly referred to as the management representative. And there's been a lot of interesting discussion on this. And now that we're more than a year into this process, we can confirm that for the average company, there's still going to be someone who takes the lead when it comes to the quality management system. There's still going to be somebody that takes the phone call from the auditors, that calls the management review meeting to order, and so forth. If you want to refer to that person as management representative, that's fine. That's not going to run counter to anything in ISO 9001:2015. However, I will remind you that in 511A, it says that management has to make itself accountable for the performance of the system. So what they're trying to get away from here by eliminating the management representative within the standard is they do not want somebody to be fully responsible for everything in the system and for management to excuse themselves from responsibility. That's the larger picture here, is that your management team has to step up and make itself accountable. Has management established a means to monitor if processes are delivering intended outputs? This is not a new idea in terms of something that we look after, but it was new enough in terms of the verbiage that we felt it warranted being mentioned. We already have an existing process for auditing KPIs and objectives, and that is our intent in ensuring that this requirement is being fulfilled. Let's transition now to Section 6. And of course, Section 6 is the primary placeholder for requirements pertaining to risk and risk-based thinking. And I know even now this is still a source of some consternation for a number of our clients. So I want to emphasize, like I have so many times before, risk management programs, formal risk management programs, are not required by this clause. This has even been written into the annex to the standard itself. You do not have to have a formal risk management program. You'll be expected to have an understanding of risk-based thinking. You will be expected to be prepared to explain how you have incorporated risk-based thinking into your quality system, but a formal process is not required. So where are we going to be looking for this? Well, we're going to be looking in a number of places. We'll be looking at management review. If you have a preventive action program, we'll look at that. We'll look at your contractual activities, your planning meetings. We will look essentially in whatever direction you point us and say, okay, this is how we have incorporated risk-based thinking into our organization. We will look at that and ascertain how effective that is. There's one other key place where risk is mentioned in the standard, and I'll be pointing it out in a little bit when we get to it. 6.1.2 is the follow-up clause, and it talks about, has a process been developed to address the identified risks? And again, we've already kind of covered how this is going to be audited in the transition audit process. Moving on to Section 6.2, we've got some ideas pertaining to quality objectives. Are quality objectives relevant to conformity of products, and do they enhance customer satisfaction? Kind of an interesting expansion of the idea with quality objectives. One of the things that we have become accustomed to as auditors is the organization is permitted quite a bit of autonomy, so to speak, in terms of what constitutes an acceptable quality objective. And certainly as auditors, we did not want to dissuade anyone from establishing something as an objective if it was value added to them. This requirement does not change that. All this requirement states is that if you choose to have objectives in areas like safety or profitability or quote wins or things of this nature, that's fine, but your objectives also have to include specific items that are going to address conformity of products and enhancement of customer satisfaction. So if your objectives were purely based in things like profitability and safety and so forth, those objectives can be retained, but you'll have to expand your picture a little bit to incorporate this requirement. Have quality objectives been analyzed to assign the resources, including the responsible parties, establishment of a timeline, and the method by which you will evaluate the performance of the objectives? For almost all of our clients, these things have been done and have been done for many years. Again, this is now a case of this has been written into the standard itself. Looking then to Section 7, we have another what I would classify as a key new idea, and that is organizational knowledge. Now, organizational knowledge is to be understood as knowledge that is gained through experience. I'm sure all of us on the call today have got people in the organization that are critical, people that if that person were suddenly no longer available to you, that would potentially impact you. And so what the standard is saying here is you need to have a way to retain the knowledge that those people have, whether that is training methods, whether that's developing work instructions, whether that is enhancing your quality controls, whether that is cross-training, and so forth. Additionally, you are expected to learn from past mistakes, to consider that when you had a customer complaint, when you had a product return, that represented a learning opportunity and therefore an opportunity to add to your store of organizational knowledge. So we would look at things like corrective action, production planning, complaint resolution, and so forth for that aspect of organizational knowledge. Additionally, the organizational knowledge requirement says that you need to consider what are your existing competencies and be ready for changing needs and trends. What's coming? What do I need to be ready for? Our audit methods for this will be pretty much the same as they've ever been, looking at your competency and, again, talking to you. What's going, what's coming, how are you going to be ready for the challenges ahead? Just a couple of items from Section 8. We have two new items to be considered as design inputs. If you are responsible for the design of your products, do your design inputs include standards and or codes of practice that you have committed to implement? And also, do your design inputs include consideration of potential consequences or failure, consequences of failure due to the nature of products or services? Now, in both cases, these are going to be of limited applicability. First of all, you may not be responsible for the design of your products, and if you are, if you don't have standards or codes of practice, there's really nothing there for us to audit. And if you are not manufacturing an end user item, the consequences of failure, again, these things are going to be difficult for you to contemplate. If what you're designing is a part of a much larger assembly, we certainly have to take that into consideration when we consider the impact that you may have and the level of analysis that would then be required. So in terms of how this will be audited, same as it ever was, we will look at design activities, look at completed projects, we'll talk to the engineering staff and take a look at the applicability of these ideas. Section 8 also has a slight change in the requirements for suppliers. Suppliers are now referred to as external providers, and external provider is actually an encompassing term. It talks about suppliers, it talks about subcontractors and so forth. And one of the requirements that they've added is, do you have a method for communicating your intentions in control and monitoring of external provider performance to external providers? Are you transparent with how you are monitoring their performance? Now, there's a lot of ways that this can be accomplished. You have a purchase order, presumably, or a contract that you're sending to your external provider. You can put the details there. You can list it on your website even. This is how we monitor external provider performance. The idea is that you're supposed to be monitoring this information anyway. Presumably, some of your external providers are going to want to know how they are performing if you're not otherwise sharing that information. Also, looking at external providers, we have a new requirement in Section 8.5, and it states that you have to have controls in place for external provider property, where ownership does not transfer to the organization. So we have an example for this. Let's say that you decided you wanted to set up a powder coating booth in your facility. And because of the costs involved, you bring in a subcontractor that sets up the booth, keeps you stocked with raw materials and so forth, but all of this is on a lease. This is not something that you purchase outright. It is considered a lease. Well, in that case, it is still external provider property. Now, this requirement has been set up to essentially align with the customer property requirement, and I'm sure all of us are well familiar with that. And the basis for the requirement is essentially the same. Doesn't belong to you, not completely, and therefore any damage or loss, etc., should be both recorded and reported to the party that owns it. Section 8 also has a list of post-delivery activities, and this has been established primarily for warranty and recycling and things like this. We've had a number of clients who have indicated that this is a clause that is of limited to no applicability to them. So again, bear in mind the scope that this clause applies to. Section 856 is a requirement that pertains to changes. And it's kind of a new idea in terms of changes. In ISO 9001-2008, the requirements for planning and responding to changes were a bit scattered. Here they've all been kind of gathered into one space. And the larger idea is, do you have a process in place to respond to changes? And we looked at this and we figured, well, you know, plan changes is one thing. And we can certainly look at that through growth plans and things that are laid out strategically in management review and a company's 5-year plan for adding new production capacity and so forth. But the other half of change is unplanned change. And so how do we approach that? What's the right way to consider that? And again, we figured, well, if it's an unplanned change, is it possible that it's happening as a result of a complaint or as a result of an internal issue? Would it be possible to then look at things like corrective action, customer complaint resolution, and so forth? And again, keeping an open mind on what some of the triggers for these unplanned changes might be. 856 also talks about, do you have a method for retaining documented information about changes, which is records, and who authorized the change, and what were the actions that arose from the change? And again, we're approaching this with a very open mind. What are the changes that were planned? What were the changes that were unplanned? And do we have records accordingly? So again, management review, corrective action, customer complaint records, and so forth will all be considered acceptable for this. Couple of items in Section 9, all pertaining to management review. We've actually got 3 slides in succession here representing 3 new points of required discussion within the management review process. Has the organization structured the management review process in such a way that it includes discussion of internal and external issue changes, including the effect on the strategic direction of the company? Also, has management review been structured in such a way that it includes discussion of external provider performance? And finally, has management review been structured to include an assessment of risk management action? This is actually the one and only place in the standard where risk management actions have to be specifically recorded is within the context of management review. Our assessment of the management review process is completely unchanged from past audits. We are still going to approach this essentially however you give it to us. If you have monthly meetings that cover a couple topics at a time, that's fine. If you have a big annual meeting where everything is addressed, that's also potentially going to be acceptable. We simply now have 3 new discussion topics that have to be included in this process. So make sure that your management review meeting has addressed these topics. And that is it for key new content. Let's turn our attention now to an overall assessment of how an audit to ISO 9001-2015 is going to differ from ISO 9001-2008. And our analysis has concluded that for the average company, the difference is going to be minimal and quite manageable. The key differences are going to be the 3 following items. The expanded role of leadership, the impact of risk-based thinking requirements, and the elimination of previously required documentation. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the presentation. Let's address this now. We have added a requirement to our audit report called the leadership interview. And we added a series of questions, and we instructed our team, our auditors, make sure that this is not just a single person. If it's an average size company, there's going to be at least a few people that are going to be participants in the management team. And we're going to chat with you on things like internal, external issues, who are your interested parties, things like this. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, we've also revised the audit report a bit to direct our auditors to make sure that leadership is directly involved in the management of the system. A targeted review of risk management. Now, as I mentioned earlier, ISO 9001-2015 does not require formal risk management, but we do have to ask you about the concept. We have to make sure that you have established your own understanding of what risk-based thinking and risk management is all about and how it impacts you as an organization. So when we inquire about this, the question is simply, how have you incorporated it into your system? What are the risk actions that you've taken? So whether it's preventive action or competency planning or contractual review or some of the more formal techniques like SWOT or FEMA, we're going to inquire, and we're going to follow up on what you say your approach to these requirements has been. And no more preconceived expectations for documentation. ISO 9001-2015 does not come with any requirements for procedures or a quality manual. So that means that we as auditors cannot demand that you have these items. However, if you as an organization choose to have a procedure or choose to have a quality manual, please recognize that the content of said procedure is considered admissible as audit criteria. So in other words, you have to do what you say you're going to do. A couple of other items I want to bring your attention to that were ushered in by the ISO 17021 standard. This is the standard that PJR and any other IAF MLA participant has to abide by. First, auditors are now going to be reviewing statutory and regulatory requirements, and we've established a special section of our audit report to record the results of those reviews. We're actually going to be, in the coming months, we're going to be presenting a webinar on that very topic, so stay tuned for that. Additionally, our auditors are now being directed to comment on the level of adherence to the IAF expected outcomes publication. So what is that, you say? Well, back in 2012, the IAF, or International Accreditation Forum, which you can think of them as kind of the top dog when it comes to certification activities. The accreditation bodies on your certs, ANAB, UCAS, and so forth, they all answer to the IAF. And the IAF wanted to weigh in on what it means to be certified. What are the expected outcomes, as they called it? What is a quality management system supposed to mean for the organization that implements it? The expected outcomes document is available for free on the IAF website. If you simply Google ISO 9001 expected outcomes, you'll find it. But here are the 9 key ideas as they are written into the expected outcomes publication. Quality management system certification should mean that your system is suitable for the processes and products. It should mean that you are analyzing and understanding customer needs and expectations. It should mean that you have specified product characteristics in such a way that you will meet all applicable requirements. It should mean that you are managing your processes in such a way as to achieve your expected outcomes. It should mean that you have determined what the resources are and that you have provided those resources. It should mean that you are monitoring and controlling product characteristics. It should mean that you are taking steps to prevent nonconformance and taking appropriate action when nonconformance occurs. It should mean that you have effective processes for both internal audit and management review. And moreover, it should mean that you are monitoring, measuring, and attempting continual improvement within your quality management system. Now, as to how the audit of ISO 9001-2015 will be the same, the key aspect of what we look at in these audits is unchanged, and that is your processes. We still are going to frame our audit in terms of what are your processes. You have to remember that element-based audits were made obsolete over 15 years ago, and we completed our transition to process-based auditing over 13 years ago. Our methods of auditing are going to be the same. We still observe, we still review documented information, we still interview people. Everything that we do to learn about your process, review evidence of your process, and so forth is going to be exactly the same. You're still going to be expected to demonstrate that the requirements of the standard have been addressed through your processes, the processes that you have established. In conclusion, PJR stands ready to ensure that your organization experiences a smooth transition to ISO 9001-2015. We are confident that for the vast majority of our clients, this transition will proceed with minimal difference from past assessments, and that you will enjoy a host of benefits from your transition to the new standard. I'd like to invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars. I'm going to be debuting a new updated webinar for ISO 9001-2015. It's going to be called Approaching Your Transition with Confidence. It'll be premiering in June of 2017 and will be provided on a semi-monthly basis thereafter. It is an in-depth review of the standard, and it also includes feedback from our first year of auditing ISO 9001-2015, as well as lessons learned from the new ISO 9002 guidance standard. Additionally, I have webinars on the interaction of processes and its importance to a successful audit, as well as what to expect during your Stage 1 audit. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be providing a webinar on statutory regulatory requirements, and we have webinars on a lot of other topics. So please check out our website, and you can see for yourself what webinars we have coming. We definitely want to keep you informed of the latest news automatically, so please opt in for updates by visiting our website at pjr.com. At the bottom of the home page, if you input your email address and click subscribe, you'll be automatically kept informed of the latest updates. I do thank you for your time, And I'll remind everyone on the call that this presentation will be available for download shortly after we are finished, and it will be available for reviewing anytime on our website under previously recorded webinars. I'll go ahead and grab the questions and see what questions we have today. Okay, we have a question from Samantha Berg. When you transition to ISO 9001 2015, does that mean that everything is switched to ISO 9001 2015 or show that you are beginning to switch? Samantha, our expectation would be that you have completely transitioned your system, and anything that is not in accordance with the new standard may potentially be written as a nonconformance. Raymond Moya asks, does strategic direction mean to the business or to the quality management system? Raymond, I think their intent is that it would apply to both. As to what is specifically auditable, I would say that that is more in the area of the quality management system. Philip Taylor asks, who would be considered an interested party? There's actually a very long list of who is considered an interested party, Philip. Some of the more common examples are going to be customers, suppliers, partner companies, the employees of the organization, and so forth. Samantha Berg asks, can you give examples of how to monitor your interested parties? Well, there's a lot of ways, and it depends on who the interested parties are. If it is your customers, hopefully you've got a contractual process, you've got ongoing customer service contact with customers. If it's suppliers, that would be through your purchasing department, your expenditures department. If it's the employees of your organization, hopefully feedback flows from team leaders and so forth, perhaps through a management team, perhaps a company-wide meeting, and so forth. There's a lot of ways that that concept can be approached. Lisa Hale asks, will we be reviewing AS 9100 changes? We do indeed have a separate webinar for that topic. Jennifer Reseter asks, can you please explain the connection between determining the scope and external-internal issues? Jennifer, the idea there is that internal and external issues are going to influence your activities as a quality management system, as a company. The idea is that the scope of your system, the scope of your activity, it's a reflection of what are we certifying here, what is the activity, and is it influenced by those internal and external issues? Does it take them into account? That goes to the, as we mentioned earlier, the appropriateness of the scope statement. So that's how we would approach that. Samantha Berg asks, if the same person that performs accounting does the internal audit, how do they audit? Well, Samantha, in terms of internal audit, the expectation is that internal auditors will be competent and unbiased. As long as that person is not auditing their own work, that's considered acceptable. In most situations, it's going to be very difficult to substantiate a single internal auditor in a company. At the very least, the expectation would be that someone else is performing an audit of the audit, so to speak. Stephanie Mell asks, I thought they had taken out preventive action. Is it okay to still have a preventive action log as an example of risk-based thinking? Absolutely. In fact, I encourage you, if you have an existing preventive action program, keep it. It's a good way to show that you are incorporating risk-based thinking into your quality management system. Samantha Berg asks, for quality objectives, if you have training, do you need to prove why that impacts your product if your employees aren't trained? Samantha, I apologize. I'm going to have to ask you to rephrase your question. I do not understand what you're asking me. Samantha Berg also asks, would corrective actions suffice for proof of organizational knowledge? In and of themselves, probably not. Remember that the idea with organizational knowledge is retaining organizational knowledge in the face of people potentially leaving the company, people potentially being moved into the other areas of the company. How do you ensure that their knowledge is not lost? And again, it's not something that you necessarily have to have a great big project folder for, but you need to be able to explain how you have approached that concept. Samantha Berg asks, if we do not design anything, can we exempt all of Section 8? Incorrect. You would only be able to exempt those portions that pertain to design, which would be Section 8.3. And a similar question from Phila Palacios. If you are a service company, yes, you would be exempting the design requirements as they appear in Section 8.3 if you do not design your products. Samantha Berg asks, do we have to list PJR as an external provider? Again, you are not required to have a list of your external providers. What is required is that you have an understanding of who your external providers are. PJR is providing you with certification services. So by definition, yes, they are an external provider. But in terms of a formal list of external providers, you would not necessarily have to list them that way. Can you expand the definition of risk management actions and give examples? Well, I'm afraid that's difficult to do because risk management is going to vary from company to company. But one possible example I can give is if you are considering the possibility that you have a single supplier for a particular type of raw material, and you take preemptive action and add a new supplier for that raw material. That could potentially be action taken in the face of the risk of you having an interruption to the to your flow of raw material. Beatrice Dvorak asks, you mentioned that no risk procedure is required. How would this be handled? Well, Beatrice, not just a risk procedure, but no procedures whatsoever. You are not required to have procedures for any topic. The idea is that you have established processes and you have methods in place for ensuring that your processes are controlled. We have less than 20 people here, so we don't have too many people in management. How does the no one person thing affect us? Well, the idea is that unless it's an exceptionally small company, and I consider exceptionally small to be 1 to 3 people, most of the time it is not going to be a single person running every aspect of management for an organization. Now, I'm not going to say that I'll dismiss that out of hand as an auditor, but I'm certainly going to challenge that if that's what I'm told. I'm going to look at management review, corrective action. I'm going to look to see, okay, who are the functioning leadership members of this company? And that's who I want to assemble for the leadership interview. Jamie Duller asks, the new standard deals with big knowledge but remove the requirements for controlled documents. If we are to eliminate documents, how best are we to conform to removing big knowledge? Is it as simple as cross-training? Jamie, first of all, you are required to control your documents. What you want to do is look for maintain documented information, and any document that you have within your system, whether it's a form, a work instruction, a procedure, or so forth, has to be controlled. Now, the other thing that you have to bear in mind is you have to control your processes. You have to ensure that your processes are fully controlled and that they are effective. Now, if you can do that without a procedure, and so forth, that's fine. And a lot of companies are already on that page. For a lot of companies, procedures are afterthoughts. They have things in place, computer systems and so forth, that they utilize to control their processes. And that's what we're going to be looking at as auditors. Meredith Baker, can you provide an example of a regulatory requirement? Maribeth, I will share with you that I've got a presentation coming on this. That's a very large topic, and I'm going to defer my answer on that to the presentation that will explain this in quite a bit of detail. Angela Briggs, how successful will we be without management and involvement? Is it at all possible to achieve certification? Angela, I feel for you. It's really going to be hard to pull that off. You've got to have buy-in from the management team. It's their system. It's their responsibility to make sure that the system is effective. As an auditor, if I am sensing that management has washed their hands of the system, I've got every right to write a nonconformance against 5.1.1a where it says that they have to be accountable. So again, I wish you luck, and I do hope that management will take another look at the requirements. Meret Sharp, if we have different sites and they aren't all transitioning at the same time, but we use many of the same systems, will the auditor be able to take the 2015 updates and apply them to 2008, or do we need to have two separate systems until all sites have transitioned? Question comes from Meret Sharp. Meret, I don't see that as unreasonable. Everything that was in ISO 9001-2008, with the exception of the procedures and quality manual requirements, is present in 2015. I think if we were shown a set of procedures and so forth under the heading of ISO 9001-2015, I think we could work with you. I don't see that as unreasonable. Chrysolita Almeida, I do hope I'm pronouncing that right. What is the deadline for transition? The last of the audits to ISO 9001-2008 will be taking place in May of 2018. If you need further information than that for your particular company, please reach out to your scheduler. Autumn Hatton, if our company is using PJ Consulting to write or update our documents, do they also work with the PJ auditors so the consultants know what the auditors will be looking for? Well, Autumn, you have to remember that Perry Johnson Registrars and Perry Johnson Consulting are two separate companies, separately run, separately operated. It is our presumption that the consulting, that all ISO 9001-2015 consultants are aware of the new requirements. But in terms of our concern is for the auditing process. In terms of dialogue and exchange between the consulting group and Perry Johnson Registrars, that I'm afraid there's no direct dialogue, not in that way. Okay, John Schnellbacher, what happens if we miss a step during the transition audit? Is it treated as a nonconformance, or is the missing new element cause for losing certification until corrected? Well, John, I'll share with you an important philosophy of auditing that I've had for many years, and this is certainly part of how we run the registrar. Truly, there is no such thing as failing the audit. There is only failing to respond to things that are raised during an audit. So in other words, if we are doing your transition audit and we see, for example, that you have not sufficiently addressed the organizational knowledge requirement, just to pick that one out of the air, we would write potentially a minor nonconformance. You would issue a corrective action plan to said minor nonconformance, and you would still receive your certification. Now, if there was such a severe disconnect between where you are and the 2015 standard, potentially we would still look at issuing a 2008 certificate to give you the time to still be a certified company and plan down the road for a more successful transition effort. Okay. Robert Cornell, there is no requirement for management review meetings, quote, in either 2008 or 2015. We integrated management review into our day-to-day activities years ago. Is this a problem? Certainly not, and you are correct. You have to be sure that you've met all of the discussion requirements, but a formal meeting per se is not required. Deidre Marbley asks, if procedures are not required, how do you prove that management has a continuance plan in the case something happens to a critical person in the business? Well, Deidre, that's not an item that we would necessarily expect to be covered in a procedure per se. And again, our approach to this is to not have any presumptions on how it's going to be approached. We would ask, what is the approach to this? We would inquire, we would learn, who are the critical people within the organization, who are at the moment the irreplaceable people within the organization, and what have you put in place for those parties. William Cordero, if I keep a quality and procedures manual, it will be good to audit or almost not used. William, if you have procedures, they are potentially subject to audit. They are considered admissible as audit criteria, even if they're not required. Gary Jagad asks, our current quality manual references ISO 9001-2008. Will the manual need to be changed to reference ISO 9001-2015? Yes. If it references the old standard, it will need to be updated to have new references in it. Brian White, can you summarize the process approach to auditing? Well, essentially, Brian, the idea with process auditing is that we do not set out to audit the clauses of the standard. We set out to audit your processes. So if you tell us that you have a warehouse process and a distribution process and a recycling process, those are the areas that we want to audit. We're not necessarily going to say, okay, show us your external provider process. That's terminology from the standard. We want our audit to be focused on what your processes are. Ana Gomez asks, is it necessary that the members of the company know ISO 9001-2015 or only key persons? Ana, the expectation is that your employees should be aware that there is a new standard, and you should, as a company, you should have evaluated the impact of the new standard. Ryan Marsh, what are the main differences between Section 8.7, control of nonconforming outputs, and 10.2, nonconformity and corrective action? Ryan, the primary difference is that in 8.7, the standard is talking about the immediate reaction to a nonconforming situation. And what are we going to do to tag this product? What are we going to do to ensure that it is not sent out to the customer? It's putting out the fire, so to speak. In Section 10.2, we are now looking at, okay, when the nonconformity occurs, what's the larger response? Is it going to necessitate corrective action and things like this? Garrett Tuck, do we need to conduct a management review in ISO 9001-2015 before the certification audit? We just had our management review and it was not ISO 2015. Garrett, in your case, what you could potentially do would be to have a transitional management review that includes a discussion of your transitioned system and the new discussion topics, the ones that we looked at earlier. An additional full meeting would not necessarily be required. Jim Kingston asks, will our internal auditors need retraining? Jim, internal auditing, you have to remember it is a competency just like any other competency within your system, and therefore it's up to you what it means to be competent or not competent as an internal auditor. So if you have a seasoned group of auditors, if they can do a self-study on the standard and be ready to go, that's fine. We're going to judge the competency of your auditors by the effectiveness of your internal auditors, or by the effectiveness of your internal audits, rather. Angela Briggs, how do we show customer communication for the auditors? Well, Angela, essentially whatever you are currently doing to interface with your customers, whether that's email, whether that's an EDI system, and so forth. We would look at whatever you have in place. Again, the deadline for transition, the old standard is expiring September 2018. All transition audits must be completed by May of 2018. Tara Bremeyer, we are a casting supplier. We design die molds per the customer's blueprint. Would that still exempt us from design and development? In terms of product design, potentially, but in that situation, it sounds like you are a participant in the design process. Tara, it would probably be best if you discussed that with your auditor offline. That's a more complicated item than I can answer at this time. Mark Honold, what is PJR's expectation regarding management involvement in the corrective action process? Well, Mark, obviously it's going to vary a bit from case to case, but I would look to see, are they participating in the corrective action team? Are they contributing ideas to the team? Are they reviewing the corrective actions? Do I see them on the distribution list for the corrective actions? When I ask about the corrective actions, are they aware of what's going on with those individual corrective actions? Those are some possible methods we would bring to bear. Kristen Copland, without the documentation requirements of the past, how would the audit process look? Would it be more of an interview with supporting documentation? Well, Kristen, again, remember, it's procedures that have been pared down, not records. There's still a significant number of required records in the standard. The phrase that you want to look for is retained documented information. And there's a number of areas where records are still required: calibration, management review, internal audit, and so forth. Steve Weber, we are a precision machine shop making product from customer drawings. Can we exclude 8.3? If you do not participate in the design process, you can exclude 8.3. Stephen Mahorko, although documented processes in the quality manual are no longer required, it seems pretty clear that those of us who have effective processes and quality manuals should keep them in place. Do you agree? Yes, absolutely. If you are utilizing procedures and they are well written and they are value added, why would you get rid of them if they're accurate and they are a positive contribution to your system? Samantha Berg, for objectives, you must prove how your objectives affect your product. So if I have training written down, do I need to prove how untrained employees would affect bad product? Samantha, I think what you're asking me is, if you have an objective for training, do you have to prove that that would affect bad product? No, not necessarily. I don't think it's too much of a leap of imagination that a implementation of a training program would have an effect on your product. However, we would expect to see how are you tracking that and how are you monitoring that. Are you looking at rejection data? Are you looking at customer returns and so forth? Corey Allen asks, will conformance to safety, health, and environmental requirements be audited? Not directly, Corey. I would ask that you tune in for our statutory and regulatory requirements presentation, which will be debuting in a few weeks, possibly a couple of months. Samantha Berg, if the person that does accounting is the internal auditor, can they audit 511C, or can they at least audit someone else who can do the accounting. Yes, Samantha, they could audit the another member of their department as long as they are not auditing their own work. Loretta Paskovich asks, what are the key items that should be included in a quality manual? I want to scale it down. Loretta, there is no quality manual required at all. If you're planning to keep one, what I would recommend is that you look at section 4.3 of the standard, and also that you define what your processes are and how they interact. But remember, a quality manual in and of itself is not required. Autumn Hatton, what is the best way to show organizational knowledge? We are a small company, under 40 people. We have many people getting ready to retire. Other than our document register, is cross-training sufficient to show organizational knowledge? Absolutely. Cross-training is an effective strategy for meeting that requirement. Stephanie Mell, with elimination of a documented quality manual as well as SOPs and work instructions, in your opinion, is it more beneficial to eliminate our 2008 documentation of these if we have them all understood well, or do you think it is helpful to still utilize them? Do you think companies who continue to have these documents have hurt or helped? Stephanie, there's a lot that you're asking me. I think for certain companies, procedures are dead weight. They have them, they blow the dust off of them once a year for the audit, and then they hope like hell the auditor doesn't find something that they're not doing, and then they move on. I think for a lot of other companies, the procedures are a valuable part of the process. So that said, I think that for the average company, there's some value to it, but if it is not a functioning part of your quality system, there's no reason for you to keep it. That's as simple as I can make it. Garrett Tuck. A friend of mine is not ready for ISO 9001 2015. His next surveillance is July of 2017. Can he request a surveillance audit and then get the upgrade audit by May of 2018? Potentially, yes. We would have to consider that. We would have to look into that more specifically. But what you're proposing sounds possible. Angela Briggs, if this is our first audit, how many management reviews are we expected to have before we are audited for the first time? Well, Angela, at a minimum, we would expect that your management review has covered all of the new discussion points. So I suppose at minimum at least one, and we would want to confirm that it included the most recent internal audit if that's possible. Are there any further questions today? Okay, I do thank you all for your time and wish you a good day. Thank you.